Okay, hello, John Marsh here, looking to give you solutions to the midterm review problems for this semester, and hoping this is useful to everybody. The first three problems on the review sheet deal with translating between English sentences and symbolic form of the logic. And so in this video, I'll try to do the first three problems and work on subsequent problems in subsequent videos. So first I'll look at problem number 1. And in this one we have two propositions, P and Q. And proposition P is that the network has been compromised, and Q is that the syslog server is down. And so we have 5 different English sentences that we're supposed to translate into symbolic form. And the first thing I do when I look at these P and Q is I say, okay, they're both sort of the bad situation. And that way I can, as I read these English sentences, I can say, is it the bad situation for the network, or is it the bad situation for the syslog server? And if it's the bad situation, that meaning the network being compromised, or the syslog server being down, meaning that this computer has crashed, then if it's the bad situation, then it's P and Q. And if it's the good situation, so for instance, if it says the network has not been compromised, then it's a not P. So I'll look for that. So part A, the syslog server is down, but the network has not been compromised. So I see it's the bad situation for the server and the good situation for the network. And so the good situation for the network is a not P, and it's saying that both are true. The but sort of means an and here, and the syslog server is down as a Q. So it's Q and not P. So I wrote Q and not P for the answer on this one. For number 2, either the syslog server is down or the network has been compromised. So it's an or statement. And it's the bad situation on both, the syslog server and the network. So it's P and Q. So it's P or Q. And as written, it's Q or P. Part C, the syslog server is up, and so that is a not Q, but the network has been compromised. That's bad for the network, so that's P. So not Q and P. Not Q and P is the answer for C. For D, if the network server has been compromised, surely the syslog server would be down. This is an if-then statement. We use the word surely here, but it still means the same thing. If, then, if the network has been compromised, if P, the network has been compromised, then syslog server would be down. If P, then Q. So if P, then Q on part D. Part E, the syslog server is down, is enough to tell the network has been compromised. So I think this enough to tell is like a sufficient to conclude that the network has been compromised. And so the syslog server being down is sufficient to conclude that the network has been compromised. So Q implies P. And that's what I have here. If Q, then P. So that's the problem number 1. And you'll notice over here in the margins here, I've summarized. As I was doing this problem, I just wrote down a summary of the implications, if P then Q, and some of the English equivalents for them. So P is necessary for Q, P is sufficient for Q, A if B, A only if B. Make sure you review these for the exam as well. Okay, problem number 2. Translate each of the sentences into symbolic form. Okay, I'll bet that's where I was actually writing these 4 things down here, because that's part of problem 2. Okay, A is a necessary condition for, a necessary condition for Q is P. And so I can translate this to is P is necessary for Q. P is necessary for Q, and that's if Q, then P. A is a sufficient condition for B. A is sufficient for B. A is sufficient for B means A implies B. A implies B. Part 3, or part C. B is implied by A. That's an if A, then B. Right. B is implied by A. And that's why we call the if-then statement an implication. For part D, whenever P is true, Q is guaranteed to also be true. That's another way of saying if P, then Q. So for part D, if P, then Q. For part E, B will be true only if A is true. So B will be true only if A is also true, I guess we could say. And I think that's the if B, then A. If we have an only if, that keeps them in the same order. So that's if B, then A. Part F, P is true if Q is true. And here, this is an if Q, then P. Notice the difference between these. One of them has an only if, and the other one has an if. When the if is by itself, that is the if part of the if-then statement. So this is an if Q, then P for part F. Finally, for part G, we have a sufficient condition for Q to be true is that P is true. In other words, P is sufficient for Q. And P sufficient for Q means if P, then Q. Okay, so there's problems 1 and 2. Problem 3. Which of the following English statements are equivalent? Show your work by translating each statement into symbolic form. These statements refer to proposed move for pieces A and B on a board game. On a game board, let little a be the proposition that A's move is legal, and little b is the proposition that B's move is legal. A's move is allowed or legal, but B's move isn't. So that would be an A and a not B. So let's look at my solution here. A and not B for part A. For part B, either A's move is illegal or B's move is illegal. So that's an or statement. And it's a not A or not B. Not A or not B. For part C, it is not the case that A's move is illegal and B's move is allowed. So we have a not out in front of not A and B. So we have a not out in front of not A and B. It is not the case that both of these things are true. And you see I've applied De Morgan's here. I flipped the sign on both the A and the B, and I also flipped the and into an or. I also applied De Morgan's to part B, where I flipped the signs on A and B, turned it into an and statement, and put the minus out in front. For part D, it says exactly one of the moves by A or B is, or A and B is legal. So that means that it's an exclusive or, one or the other, but not both. Exactly one. That's an exclusive or, and I'll write it with the plus sign in a circle. That's our symbol. Finally, part G, or part E. Saying that either A's move isn't legal or B's move is allowed isn't right. In other words, we have a big minus sign out in front of an or statement here. Either A's move isn't legal, either not A or B. Not A or B. If we said that, it wouldn't be right. And so I'm going to apply De Morgan's here and get A and not B. And we see that none of these are equivalent to each other except for A and E. And so the answer to this one is that A and E are equivalent. Okay, hope that helps. Problems 1 through 3. More videos coming.